by and large, for post-traumatic stress disorder, there's not much in the way of pharmacology. I mean, recently, there have been some very interesting studies with MDMA, with ecstasy, showing that people have one or two of these psychotherapy-guided trips with the drug, and they feel a whole lot better. They feel it was a profound experience. And it's interesting that ecstasy, which is sort of the social connection psychedelic, people tend to feel more intensely connected with one another when they're on it, is useful with PTSD because many people with PTSD feel shame. They feel frightened of other people. They feel, even if it was in no way their fault, most people who have been traumatized blame themselves somehow for not having predicted that it would happen or not having done something else when it did happen. Denying the loss of agency, the loss of control, that is the key element of trauma. And so a drug that facilitates social connection seems to be actually helpful for people with PTSD. So, we're not purely physical beings. We're not purely psychological beings. We're both. And it makes sense that either psychotherapies or medications that can help in the other domain can be more helpful.
Yeah, post-traumatic stress disorder was exactly the example I was going to go to, because it is a disorder that typically has, as far as I understand it, a very clear root in an experience or a sequence of experiences that are traumatic. And I know that you've done a lot of work on PTSD. Now, you've described, I think, the phenomenology of post-traumatic stress a bit and the symptoms, but maybe we could dive a bit deeper into it. What is going on in the brain of somebody with PTSD? How does it change? How does their brain change before and after the onset of the disorder?
Well, we've looked at the literature involving PET and MRI studies and what you see is two related but different kinds of changes. So in one case, you have inhibition of the medial prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that thinks, that plans, and that can inhibit emotion. And so what you tend to see in the more common hyperarousal kind of PTSD is that they have trouble planning, relating to people, but they're irritable. They get set off real easily. They'll find themselves yelling at people they love and doing things that they feel badly about later on. They get into drugs to try and calm their affective instability. But you have a kind of explosion of emotion and inhibition of thought in the standard hyperarousal PTSD. So they have intrusive thoughts about the traumatic event. They avoid stimuli that may remind them of it. They have this kind of negative view of themselves and what's left of their future. The other change, though, in a subgroup now, it's a subtype of PTSD, is called the dissociative subtype. These are people who are hypo-emotional and who have elevated activity in the medial prefrontal cortex. So they're constantly inhibiting emotion rather than allowing it to flourish. And these people have trouble just even sometimes accessing memories. They may forget huge amounts of what happened during the traumatic event. Many rape victims experience the rape as if they're floating above their bodies, feeling sorry for the woman that's being assaulted below. And it puts them in a situation where it's hard for them to face, understand, and work through what really happened and the implications of the trauma. And when they can do it, they can make a change. I had a patient recently who migrated from a country that is famous for not treating women very well, managed to become a healthcare professional here, but was chronically depressed and miserable. And she told me that she just, she retired early. She just felt bad, and her friends all saw her as depressed, as well as her psychiatrist, and they were having trouble treating her with meds. Wasn't helping all that much. And I said, well, what kind of trauma did you experience, in part, that led you to leave? She said, when I was 12 years old, I was raped by my landlord. And my parents were afraid to do anything about it because they were afraid we'd be thrown out of the building. And I discovered growing up as a teenager after that my body wasn't my own, that men felt free to say and do anything they wanted on the streets. It was terrible. So I got it. She was very hypnotizable. And I had her picture. I said, I want you to be your own mother. I want you to picture yourself as a 12-year-old girl after you've been assaulted. And she started to cry. And I said to her, was it her fault? And she said, no, she's a sweet little girl. And then she said, I'm stroking her hair. I'm stroking her hair. And cried some more. But was able to recognize that the sort of shaming that is often done of sexual assault survivors was just flat out wrong. And that part of how bad she felt about herself was carrying on this myth that somehow a 12-year-old girl had induced sexual assault from this rapist landlord. And she called me about a week later and she said, my psychiatrist wants to know what you did to me because I'm not depressed anymore. And he doesn't understand why. And my friends don't recognize me. They say you're a different person. So sometimes you can do things when people are in a mental state where they're sort of cutting loose the usual ways, the assumptions they've made that continue to harm and damage them, and seeing things from a different point of view and allow themselves to experience emotion that is reconstructive. It isn't just more self-blame and guilt. It's a capacity to have deep affection for the person they were and connect with themselves in a different way.